friends, it is always a pleasure to be back at Chautauqua. It's my honor to introduce this year's Chautauqua Institution Robert H. Jackson Lecture. As Jeff Follansbee said, the Jackson Lecture is now in its 6th year, and it combines three things that are classically Chautauqua. First, it is in the name of and in tribute to Robert H. Jackson, one of the leading, maybe the leading product of Chautauqua Institution, a man of this soil, of this region, who rose to the heights of the world stage and permanent, large historical significance. Secondly, the Jackson's lecture assembles excellent talent to address a vital topic. That's what Chautauqua is about. The topic of the annual Jackson Lecture is the Supreme Court of the United States. And third, this lecture has timing. The summer season of Chautauqua falls, of course, shortly after the end of the Supreme Court's term, during its summer recess, an excellent opportunity to take stock in the court as an institution important to each of our lives. Of course, this summer particularly has timing because we have just completed a Supreme Court appointment summer. And so this lecture is a time to both look back and to look forward at the court. This year, in addition to those three qualities, the Jackson Lecture has a fourth thing going for it. It is, as Jeff mentioned, the ramp into next week's lecture theme, the Supreme Court of the United States. And I dare say that this afternoon's lecture is going to set a very high bar. In fact, it may be, in a premature way, the peak of next week's lectures. And I say that as one of next week's lecturers as we consider this topic. The past Jackson lecturers here at Chautauqua are an illustrious group. Professor Jeffrey Stone of the University of Chicago, Linda Greenhouse, the New York Times Supreme Court correspondent, Seth Waxman, the former Solicitor General of the United States, Jeff Toobin, author and writer, author of The Nine, and Paul Clement, another former Solicitor General of the United States. Today's lecturer, the 6th Jackson lecturer, Jeff Shesol, is in every way that illustrious company. He's a graduate of Brown University. As a Rhodes Scholar, he attended and earned a graduate degree at Oxford University. He was a nationally syndicated cartoonist. Thatch was the name of his cartoon. He was and is an accomplished historian. He wrote a wonderful book, not the topic of today's talk, but I encourage you, it's in the bookstore, called Mutual Contempt, about the fraught relationship between Lyndon Johnson and Robert Kennedy. That book earned much acclaim and a wide readership, but more importantly, it earned a select readership. It was read by Bill Clinton as President of the United States, which led him to send a MASH note to Jeff Shesol, which led to a job offer which led Jeff Shesol to become a Clinton speechwriter 98, 99, and 2000, the last 3 years of the Clinton presidency. Following that experience in public service, Jeff and colleagues formed an ongoing business in Washington called the West Wing Writers, and they do speechwriting and consulting, strategic advising to candidates and philanthropists and corporate institutions and others. And he has continued as a historian. In March, he published this book, Supreme Power, Franklin Roosevelt versus the Supreme Court, Kanaf. And it is a majestic, excellent book. It is the story of the court-packing fight that was waged in response to President Franklin Roosevelt's proposal in the summer of 1937. It is a book about the Constitution. It is a book about democracy. It is a book about the presidency and the judiciary. And thus, obviously, it is not only historical, but it is contemporary. I hope you have seen the wide acclaim and glowing reviews that the book has earned, Alan Brinkley's review in the New York Times, a recent essay in The Nation. I dare say, and I hope sincerely, that this is a book that's about to win some very big awards. I met Jeff Shesol when he reviewed Justice Jackson's That Man in the New York Times. And his review, I'm sure, was part of the success that book enjoyed. We then became friends, and of course had many topics of mutual interest. It has been an honor for me to be a kibitzer along the way as this thinking and research and writing became this book. And there are many points of mutual interest as I write about Justice Jackson because he was a player, not one of the leading players, but a player as an Assistant Attorney General of the United States in 1937 in this court-packing saga. So there is a Jackson role. There is also in a cameo sense, a Chautauqua institution role. In the summer of 1937, the court-packing summer, Jackson, then a third-level official in the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, the Solicitor General, and then the Assistant Attorneys General, brought here as a VIP guest the Solicitor General, Stanley Reed. Jackson did that at the request of his dear friend, Dr. Arthur Bester, the president of Chautauqua Institution, as part of Jackson's very ongoing and sustained participation in the life and the riches of Chautauqua Institution during the decades where it was a big part of his life. And so Stanley Reed, the Solicitor General, DOJ number 2, and Robert Jackson, DOJ number 3, come here as the proposal and brainchild of DOJ number 1, and their ultimate boss, President number 1, is being debated on the floor of the United States Senate. And this was the agenda. Reed came here on Thursday, July 8th, greeted by Bester, staying in the Athenaeum with Mrs. Reed. And that Thursday evening was hosted for a dinner across the road in what was then called the Country Club. That is, you'll note, off the grounds. 3 big words, right, in Chautauqua understanding. Stanley Reed was a Kentuckian, and being off the grounds meant an opportunity for Chautauqua to host and welcome him and to celebrate some of the fine products of Reed's native Kentucky. The guests on that Thursday evening were the judges and lawyers of this region, and I'm sure an interesting and wide-ranging, although unrecorded, discussion was part of the events. The next evening, Friday, July 9th, Reed spoke in the amphitheater. He spoke not on court packing, at least not directly. He spoke on the topic of the future of states in the federal system. In other words, federalism. And he spoke from a 30-page text. Lord help us if he read it. It's not quite clear from the press accounts whether it was that kind of event. It's a very scholarly, very smart address by one of the people who was being discussed for a Supreme Court appointment. Had Roosevelt gotten all these seats, Reed probably was at the top of the short list. Introduced by Jackson, another person on that list, and lo and behold, although not through court packing, each does become a justice of the Supreme Court. But I was once advised by an excellent mentor, historian, teacher, and guide to do all the research and assemble all the facts, but then also don't be afraid to say and write what you know. And so I ask you if you agree with me, because I know that on that Thursday and on that Friday, Reed and Jackson and the lawyers and judges of this region and Bester talked a whole lot about court packing, even if nobody ever put it on paper or put it in the Chautauqua Daily. Had to be the case because it was America's topic of conversation. Now, Jeff Shesol will pick up, in many ways, the denouement as part of his lecture, but that backdrop gives, in addition to the Jackson lecture in the Supreme Court, a particular Chautauqua piece of continuity as we have this conversation about the Supreme Court, our Supreme Court, that Supreme Court, the court packing proposal, and the importance to citizenry of what the Supreme Court means in our life. The 2010 Chautauqua Robert H. Jackson Lecturer on the Supreme Court of the United States, Jeff Shesol.